Hey, let's talk suicide on this episode of The Hot Zone.
This is The Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, I'm heading to the airport, about to fly back to Panama today for a few days before I pack up my body armor and head over to Afghanistan. Yesterday I spent a little time on the podcast wondering about what makes modern countries have much higher suicide rates than countries where basically everything sucks. You know what I mean? For example, if you had to guess which country would make its people want to end it all, which would you choose? Venezuela or Japan? How about Pakistan or Belgium? Iraq or Switzerland? Well, surprisingly, Japan, Belgium, and Switzerland all have suicide rates more than 5 times higher than Venezuela, Pakistan, or Iraq. That's right. There's been so much talk lately about how bad conditions are in Central America, which is held out as the reason so many people are leaving those areas and coming to the United States. But the U.S. is another country in which the suicide rate is high and climbing. Now more than 5 times the rate in El Salvador, Honduras, or Guatemala. Isn't that kind of weird? So yesterday I talked about my theory as to why this is. The fact that young people are, especially in Western countries, are interacting far more with devices than they are with flesh and blood humans, and at earlier and earlier in ages, just contributes to a disconnected sense of meaninglessness that makes people feel life just isn't worth all that much. People have a deep desire to be needed, and a device just can't provide that. It doesn't need you. But there's more to it than that. People need a battle to fight. In developing countries, that battle is for literal survival. And you and your whole family are in it together. Everybody needs to be in the struggle if the family's going to survive. So even the kids are, necessary. Whether it's working the farm, herding the goats, or going to fetch water, the young people have purpose in their lives. How could something like Candy Crush compete with that? I really believe that in a lot of ways, Americans are literally entertaining themselves to death. All that passive activity makes it increasingly difficult to think deep thoughts or feel deep emotions and find a purpose bigger than yourself. Now here's one other factor that I think contributes largely to suicide rates that I've never heard anybody talk about. I just went and did some cursory research on Google and found out that the countries with the highest suicide rates also happen to be the countries where abortion is legal and common for almost any reason. By contrast, countries that restrict the killing of the unborn, no matter what their poverty level, tend to have some of the lowest suicide rates. For example, Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. The majority of people there live on less than $1 a day. They've been plagued by hunger. Now, this is probably more correlation than causation, but it stands to reason a country whose culture doesn't value human life enough to preserve it for their most vulnerable citizens is obviously not going to inculcate its people with a healthy respect for the value of your own life. Now, like I said, the link between suicide rates and legal abortion may be circumstantial, but there's a direct correlation between atheism and suicide. The fewer citizens there are in a country who describe themselves as religious, the higher the suicide rate is likely to be. And again, that's just from my own cursory research. Well, here's the most alarming statistic of all. If U.S. military veterans were a country, they'd have the highest suicide rate in the world, more than a third higher than the current number 1 country, Lithuania. We've seen over 6,000 veteran suicides every year since 2005, and that constitutes a national crisis. I think there are many complex factors that lead to the problem we're seeing today, and there are a lot of people out there who have spent a lot more time looking at the issues surrounding post-traumatic stress and all that than I have. But to the military's credit, they're taking the problem very seriously. I want to show you some testimonies the Army's filmed that it's using in its anti-suicide push.
I have my own story, and I've never shared it with anyone, but hearing a very personal story from someone today actually made me change what I was going to talk about completely and to share my story, because it really pulled at my heartstrings, and I don't see why I shouldn't share my story to possibly pull at someone else's heartstrings. 10 years ago, I We were going through a lot, my family and I. We'd lost everything, basically. Lost our restaurant, lost our home. We lost, or almost lost our home. And I felt like a burden to everyone. I just lost my girlfriend at the time. Of course, you know, when you're in high school, that's a big deal. I had contemplated taking my life. I'd even wrote the note and was about to do it. And luckily the minister caught me. I remember what it was like to be helpless. I remember what it was like to feel alone and beside yourself. Because during my struggle, there was people there for me everywhere. And I was so consumed in my own self and everything that was going on in my struggle. And I let that struggle overcome me. I let it have that power over me. Something that's not even human, and something that's not even, it's a feeling. I let a feeling totally take hold of my body. I did, you know, check into a behavioral health, and I got help then, which was really hard for me. I needed that help. I needed to be there. I needed to see someone, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think as I got older, or as I get older, and as I've learned, it doesn't make me a weak person as I thought then for seeking help. But I think the most valuable thing that I may have learned while I was there was that I wasn't alone. I wasn't secluded like I thought. My mind was playing a trick on me. My thoughts were playing a trick on me. And I was never alone to begin with. You know, I've heard jokes be made about mental health issues and about suicide and seeking help, and jokes about those hospitals, and it's not good. It's real demoralizing, more than anything. To have someone joke about it. I've had individuals confide in me with similar issues and struggles, and because of my experience, I knew kind of what to say a little bit. I knew kind of what to do. I'm lucky for what I went through 10 years ago, because it helped me be a better person, and it gave me that personal growth that I need. I'm about to have a fiance. You know, we're gonna get married probably within the next year or two. I wouldn't have that if it wasn't for me seeking help. You know, vent to someone. Don't bottle it up. Always be there for someone. You know, we're all in this together. That's my biggest thing is, you know, we're all in this together. We all need to encourage each other to reach out and to seek help more.
So this is great, and I think they should do more of it. Sharing our troubles helps other people who are going through the same thing. But I really think addressing the root causes of the problem will require more than this. In the case of our veterans, you have to understand the very unique stressors that hit a guy kind of by surprise when he returns from downrange. His battle in the kinetic sense might just be over, but another one is beginning when he gets home. See, the most difficult thing for a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine to handle when they come back off deployment is the fact that everyday life is just so complicated. Here's what I mean. Combat simplifies your life a lot. When you're in battle, you're not worrying about your bills or insurance, your mortgage, and you know, your relationships are kind of on hold. And you're very, very necessary. And I mean, a unit in a fight needs all the help it can get. Every troop is supremely valuable. It's built into the military ethos that they leave no man behind. So your problems are in the now, not in the future. And there's some group of guys over there that wants to kill you and your buddies, and all it takes to solve your problem is right in your hands. 11 pounds of pressure with your trigger finger can fix just about all the problems you've got. You own everything. If you need to use somebody's house, for example, you just take it. So your life is very simple. Well, then you come home. Your car insurance got canceled, your wife's gotten used to running things without you, and everybody at the mall is using this very precious, costly liberty you've been fighting for and watching your friends die for to surf social media on their phones. So you feel kind of angry and useless, disconnected, unnecessary. And that's a toxic mix that leads many of these guys to put a gun in their mouth. For too long, the military has, I think, tried to band-aid that problem and actually is like prohibited chaplains, for example, from using strategies that will mitigate the problems that have been proven to increase meaning in a person's life. I did a story about that on CBN a few years ago. Check it out.
Chaplains have been an integral part of the military throughout our nation's history, bringing hope to the living and comfort to the dying. Now some chaplains are coming under fire from official government policy and must choose between their conscience and their commander's orders. The repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell worries chaplains who follow the biblical view of same-sex relationships. Congress stepped in, passing a bill that guaranteed the rights of all military personnel to exercise their faith.
I put in an amendment to the 2014 National Defense Authorization Act that simply expands in law and statute to be in compliance with the Constitution itself.
They can, in fact, bring their faith to the table in their work.
Ron Cruz spent 21 years as an Army chaplain and now heads the Chaplain Alliance for Religious Liberty.
Chaplains, and not only chaplains, but all service members, cannot receive recrimination for living out their faith.
Despite the law, many Christians and especially chaplains often find themselves at odds with military leadership. Some of the more egregious examples: 2 Baptist chaplains forced out of the VA chaplain program for quoting scripture and praying in Jesus' name. A chaplain candidate and former Green Beret was asked to represent a faith other than his own because, quote, there are too many Baptist chaplains, unquote. A soldier in Afghanistan accused of engaging in hate speech because he had a Bible in his desk at work.
I got an email from a chaplain in Afghanistan who preached a sermon for his unit talking about the last days and the fact that there would be a rise in homosexuality. He got called into his battalion commander's office and was told, you cannot preach from that text.
Another example of this tension happened here recently at Fort Benning, Georgia, home of the Airborne and Ranger Training Brigade. A chaplain was asked to give a suicide prevention class, but what happened next exploded in controversy.
Captain Joe Lawhorn serves as chaplain for the 5th Ranger Training Battalion based at Fort Benning.
He wears the credentials. He's a pathfinder. He's a master blaster parachutist. He is a chaplain who really knows what it means to be a soldier.
Chaplain Lawhorn was asked to lead a suicide prevention class at the Mountain Ranger Camp. In addition to covering the Army-wide curriculum, he cited his own experience and shared his personal struggle with depression.
Joe, as a good chaplain, identified with him and said, I want you to know I've been there where you are. So I want to tell you how I have dealt with some issues of depression. And so he gave his Rangers a handout.
One Ranger took a picture with his phone and sent it to the Military Association of Free Thinkers and Atheists, who posted it on their website.
During the presentation, according to those who were witnesses who provided statements later, said at no time did Chaplain Lawhorn say, mine is the only way, mine is the best way.
Not long afterward, his brigade commander censured Chaplain Lawhorn for giving the handout. In our investigation, the military's been unable to cite any written rule or regulation the chaplain actually violated. Meanwhile, the Ranger who complained received no punishment, although he violated Army policy by going outside his chain of command. Those actions speak volumes about how toxic the climate has become for Christians in the military.
You're in a very pluralistic environment, so you get all faiths and all walks of life.
Former Army Ranger Jeff Struker became a chaplain halfway through his 24-year military career. He's been involved in every major American conflict since 1987.
George Washington, when he formed the Continental Army, formed 2 branches, infantry and chaplains, and basically said, I need warfighters, and then I need men who can minister to the soul of warfighters. Any chaplain who is doing their job well is a force multiplier for a unit. That force multiplier term means that the unit is more effective in combat. Doesn't matter if it's a transportation unit, a hospital unit, or if it's an infantry unit. They're more effective in combat with a chaplain than without a chaplain.
Struker says the vital role of chaplains goes beyond leading church services for the troops.
You need somebody in the unit who can deal with the spiritual issues of a soldier. No one else in the unit can do what a chaplain could do. 99% of the counseling that I did was people who weren't Christian. They came to me because I was there while the bullets were flying, and they needed somebody to talk to.
And that's not all the chaplain does.
I would say that there are 10,000 cases in Iraq and Afghanistan, this is not an exaggeration, where atrocities could have happened, but they didn't, because the chaplain was there to be a moral influence on the men and women that were on those battlefields.
Strucker says the current climate would make it more difficult to do his job.
If the point comes where my career is asking me to do something that my denomination or my relationship to God prohibits, then I got to leave the military over that.
You serve everybody with grace and dignity. However, when someone comes to you for counsel, you've got to be absolutely clear up front. If you're coming to me, I counsel from a biblical perspective.
I don't want to see good chaplains leave the military. I hope that many more good men and women will become chaplains. But if you can't do it in good conscience, you owe it to God to leave the military.
From Fort Benning, Georgia, I'm Chuck Holton.
So the bottom line is we need to put down our phones more and interface with each other in real life. We need to do things that affirm the value and dignity of life, all life. And we need to focus less on entertainment and more on making the world a better place. That's one reason I started this podcast. I want to help you understand crisis around the world better, yes. But I also want to give you a conduit through which you can do something about the news. Be the good guy in the story. Reach into the lives of people that I meet and improve them. Engage more with the news rather than just being a spectator. So I hope you'll join me and like and share the podcast. We've got some amazing content coming soon, and things are going to keep getting better. So I'm Chuck Holton. I'll see you back here tomorrow on The Hot Zone.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.